Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining me for today's webinar about how to calculate return on investment with Infaco's electric group pruning shear or our electric tying gun. If you've been following along with our webinar series, then you saw that our first webinar was all about the actual labor situation, and our second webinar was with a vineyard owner up in Oregon, and she talks about her implementation strategy when she switched to electric and how she made the most out of it and the real numbers that she has seen for her return on investment. After today's webinar, I will be emailing out links to both of those presentations as well as the research study from our very first webinar. If you are watching this on YouTube, you can find those videos in our ROI series playlist. All right, let's dive into the webinar today. First of all, I just want to say that the whole idea behind return on investment with our line of tools is based on this idea that we make tools that make work less fatiguing on the human body. And the easier and more comfortable it is to do work, the more productive workers will naturally be. So what I want to show you is something I often talk about with clients: the number of cuts per hour when pruning in a vineyard. This is a vineyard example. You can see in this chart, the orange line is an electric shear, and you can see that the number of cuts per hour is just staying very, very consistent. And you can see with the manual shear, this blue line, the number of cuts per hour gradually goes down over the course of the day. And you can see that 4-hour mark, it's really quite noticeable. At the 4-hour lunch break mark, that is when you start seeing productivity really drop off for people using a manual shear. The reason I like to talk about this is because I want to point out that the electric shear is not faster than a manual shear. In fact, I have seen workers who with a manual shear can go just as fast as an electric shear in the first 1, even 2 hours. But I have very, very rarely seen any worker who can match the speed of an electric shear consistently over the course of an entire day. So that's why I like to talk about productivity and not speed. Over the course of the day, that productivity difference between an electric shear versus a manual shear, that distance between the orange and blue lines, that is the money to be made in this. So if you're a vineyard contractor, this represents the additional money you would make. You could take on more jobs each year. If you were a vineyard owner, this is the amount of money you would save each year. So what I'm going to do today is show you how do I calculate the distance between the orange line and the blue line. Here is a great example of how we do that. This is an example with Numafruit. It's a huge orchard grower in the UK. And in the UK, they also have a labor crunch, just like we do here. And Numafruit had 320,000 trees to prune. They had 20 people they wanted to outfit with electric shears. And 20 people times 20 shears at $2,000 a pop, they were a little standoffish about the investment at first. So what they did was they took 5 and did a trial. They took 5 shears. And they very systematically recorded each of the people pruning, each of their numbers per day, how many trees did each person get done each day. And after a really systematic study, they saw that indeed it was a 40% increase for them. So that was in an orchard setting. You can imagine, I mean, a lot of my clients are spending $12 an hour on a worker, even as much as 15, 16 is pretty normal, I find. And you can imagine what a 40% productivity increase has done for their bottom line. So let's show you how I calculate the bottom line in Excel. That's my favorite software to use. So let's go over there. So what I do is I have an Excel sheet already set up, and I'm happy with anybody who wants to call me after this and do a one-on-one example with your vineyard or your orchard. We can look at your numbers and do this. But what I've done is I've built into the spreadsheet already this idea that you're going to spend more on the electric shear than you're normally used to spending in on your manual shears. So manual shears, people might spend $25, $50, $100 a year. And what I'm calculating is that with an electric shear, you're going to spend more like $668 a year. And this is a really conservative estimate. So I have not only built in the price this year, but I've also built in annual maintenance service, some extra blades, I've built in some repairs, and I've built in the idea that you would use our safety system and need a new glove every year. So what I've done is I've amortized this investment over a 6-season period. Many of my clients have shears that have lasted them 10 years, easy. They refuse to upgrade because their shear is working so well. But I'm going to say worst case scenario, your shear only lasts you for 6 seasons. So you can see there's no tricks here in the formula. You can see I've taken the price of the shear, I've divided it by 6. I've taken annual maintenance service, 5 years worth of annual maintenance service over 6 seasons. Again, a couple extra blades. Our annual maintenance service includes blades, but just in case you need even more blades. And here with our safety system, for instance, I have built in that you would need a new safety glove each season. Now let me just real quick say something about our safety system. If you have a vineyard, please have a safety system. If you have any sort of powered pruner, any powered pruner is going to have a lot more torque and be a lot faster than a manual shear. Our electric shear is designed to be the most ergonomic shear in the world, so it's going to completely eliminate repetitive motion injuries. But if you put your left finger in there, it is going to cut it off. So our electric safety system completely eliminates that idea. Basically, you wear a glove on your left hand, and when the shear comes in contact with that glove, they're on the same electrical circuit. It grounds out the circuit, and it actually makes it impossible for the blade to budge. So in practice, when you go to cut, if you accidentally touch that glove, the shear would open and it wouldn't cut anymore. So it looks like the shear just bounces off of this cotton glove. That's what it looks like in practice. So I just want to make sure to note that I've already priced this with a safety system because in a vineyard setting, that's a really common thing for people to want. Then I come down here to our customer information, and I'm going to find out from you how much do you pay per hour, how many days do you work per week, and how many weeks per year do you prune. All those things are going to go into this calculation. You'll notice that the only thing that changes really here is the number of vines being pruned per worker per day. So we know that in a vineyard setting, we've been selling electric shears into vineyards for longer than any other company in the world. We know from exporting to 40 different countries, all these different methods of pruning styles, we know that the average productivity increase is 30%. So that's what this represents. Going from 400 vines per worker per day up to 520, that's your 30% increase right there. Now in this vineyard, the person said, okay, I don't want to just, here's what I want to do. Okay, we're increasing the number of vines pruned per worker per day. So what I want to do is reduce the number of workers who are pruning. Now, for a lot of clients, this is probably resonating with you because maybe you tell your vineyard contractor, hey, I need 20 people to come prune the vineyard this year, and your vineyard contractor can only find you 15. So you probably have found yourself in situations where you needed more people than you could actually get a hold of, or else you would have had to raise your wages astronomically to try to get enough workers. So this person said, I'm drawing the line, I'm not doing that anymore. I am, instead of employing 6 people to prune, I'm only going to employ 4. And those 4 people can get it done because they're going to increase their productivity. Alternatively, I have seen other vineyards say, I want to keep the same number of people, but I want to decrease the amount of time that they prune. So I had 5 people before, I want to keep 5 people, but instead of pruning for 3 weeks, I want them to only prune for 2 weeks. So I've seen people go on both ends of that management. And then what it does is this Excel file, it really is just calculating. You can see the formulas right there. It's calculating, okay, if we pay this much per hour and people work this much time per day, and this is how many people are working, here is what the labor cost is going to be for that crew. So in this case, the person was able to go from $36,000 a year down to $27,000 a year on their labor cost. Of course, their pruning shear investment per worker per year is higher, right? With the manual shear, they were only paying maybe $50 a year at the most, and now we've amortized this investment we've seen, it's going to be about $668 a year. The equipment cost per crew per season is obviously much higher, right? So instead of being $300, 6 people times $50 is $300. It's going to be $668 times 4 people. But you can see that the dollar savings are definitely there. So compared to manual shear pruning, these people are going to be saving $6,888 every year in labor costs. Let me show you what this looks like with a vineyard. With a vineyard in time. Our tying machine, I've done the same sort of thing where I've amortized the investment over 6 seasons. I've even added in annual maintenance service, which a lot of people don't do. I said, oh, what if they did that every single year? And again, I've plugged in some real client numbers. This is a bit of a different spreadsheet. You can see that here we need to know the number of vines that are being tied, and we also need to know the number of ties per vine. But when we have some of this basic information, we're able to figure out a lot. So we know that our tying machine goes 3 times faster than manual pruning. So here I've been very conservative and I've said I'm only going to put in double. So this person, I figured out that we're just going to say, okay, let's pretend like they only go 2 times as fast, the number of ties per worker. But I'm also going to put in some productivity increase here, the number of workers tying. So I'm decreasing the number of workers from 4 people to 2 people, and I'm going to keep them tying the same number of weeks. This is a real example of what's actually possible. When we do that, you'll see that the labor cost per crew per season drops. It's cut almost in half because we've gone from 4 people for 3 weeks to 2 people for 2 weeks. And that is accomplished and totally doable because the tying machine is so much faster. I've also, if you want to come seek me out after this webinar and we'll do your example, I've got the costs on lots of other types of things like bread ties or green tape. I've got those costs already. So we can actually plug those in and look at what it would be like to convert from your method to our method. For instance, this person was using bread ties, and the bread ties are about double the cost of our ties. So it was also another way that this person saved money. In fact, this person, their total savings was around $30,000 a year, all because of labor costs and some tie costs. I'm going to show you another example from another vineyard. This is a vineyard in Healdsburg who switched to our tying machine. This is their example. So they were actually paying $22 an hour to attract labor. And what they did was they said, we want to go from tying 4 weeks a year to tying just for 2 weeks a year. That was how they decided to adjust their labor crew. So they still have 5 people tying. They are still doing the same number of ties per vine. A lot of things stayed the same for them. All they did was cut in half the number of weeks that they were tying. One of the reasons they wanted to do this is because the climate has really been shifting, and they have been finding that they have a lot less time to tie. So not only do they have less labor available to them, and not only are they paying $22 an hour, but sometimes with the climate, they cannot find enough time to tie in time for bud break. So this is another way that they've sort of reduced their headache of their vineyard. Now with them, you can see that their labor cost per crew per season went down from $21,000 a year to $9,500 a year just for tying. And that, at the end of the day, was a huge savings of $10,000 per season. This is even though they were switching from ties that were a little less expensive than our ties. Even so, just the labor savings alone is enough to produce a huge change. So that's how I go about calculating these things. I have actually Excel sheets for vineyards and for orchard contractors, for vineyard contractors, for vineyard owners. So no matter what your situation is, we can probably start to really hone in on some pretty precise numbers about what you would see in your actual operation. Again, trying to get at this difference between the orange line and the blue line. What is your difference? What is your ROI going to be? Well, thank you for joining me today for our last webinar in the series. Again, if you haven't checked out the other 2 webinars we already had, I would really encourage you to. There's some great information and some great tips. Thanks so much for joining me.